architected cinematic revenge narrative with emotional depth and strategic structure. My name is Zari, and the day Marcus tried to have me declared mentally incompetent in front of a judge, I smiled. Not because I'd lost my mind, but because I'd already won. He thought my wheelchair made me weak. He thought my disability made me controllable. But that one decision I made 6 months earlier, it destroyed everything he'd built on lies. Have you ever watched someone you love transform into a stranger who wanted to erase you? Let me back up. 3 years ago, I was a senior product designer at a tech firm in Seattle, living in an accessible downtown apartment I'd saved 5 years to afford. I had multiple sclerosis, diagnosed at 24, now 29, and I used a wheelchair about 60% of the time. On good days, I could walk with a cane. On bad days, my body betrayed me completely. But my mind? My mind was always sharp. That's where I met Marcus Chen at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. He was a financial consultant, charming in that quiet, attentive way that makes you feel seen. He asked about my design work, not my wheelchair. He asked about my dreams, not my limitations. For the first time in years, someone looked at me and saw Zari the artist, Zari the creative force, not Zari the disability. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. Small wedding, just family and close friends. His parents flew in from Vancouver, polite but distant. My parents, immigrants who'd worked themselves to exhaustion to give me every opportunity, cried with joy. My little sister Layla was my maid of honor, already suspicious of Marcus in that protective way younger siblings can be. "He asks a lot of questions about your medical stuff," she'd whispered during the reception. "About your doctors, your medications, your episodes." "He cares," I'd said defensive. "He wants to understand." But Layla was right. Marcus did ask questions, constantly. Architected emotional narrative arc spanning isolation, manipulation, realization, and strategic justice. The first red flag came 3 months into our marriage. I'd had a flare-up, spent 2 days in bed unable to feel my legs properly. When I recovered, Marcus sat me down with a spreadsheet. "I've been thinking about your condition," he said, laptop open. "The stress of work might be triggering these episodes. What if you took a leave of absence? Focus on your health." It sounded caring. It looked like love. I reduced my hours to part-time. The flare-ups continued, because that's how MS works unpredictably. And Marcus's concern deepened into something else, control disguised as protection. He started attending my doctor appointments, asking detailed questions about my cognitive symptoms. MS can cause brain fog, memory issues, processing delays. I experience them occasionally, like anyone with a chronic neurological condition. But Marcus documented every instance, like he was building a case file. "You forgot we had dinner plans Tuesday," he'd say gently. Voice recorder app open on his phone. "Do you remember what day it is?" "You left the stove on again. I'm worried about your safety." "You seem confused lately. Did you take your medication?" Small things, constant things, things that made me question myself. Then came the financial isolation. 6 months into our marriage, Marcus suggested combining our accounts for simplicity. His income was larger. He managed finances for a living. It made sense. I agreed, too exhausted from another flare-up to argue. Within weeks, he'd move my design income into a joint account he monitored obsessively. Every purchase required explanation. Coffee with Layla? We need to budget better. New art supplies for freelance work? Is this really necessary right now? When I pushed back, he'd sigh with exaggerated patience. "Zari, I'm trying to help you. You're not thinking clearly. The MS is affecting your judgment." My work suffered. How could it not? I was second-guessing every decision, every creative instinct, every thought. My boss, Jennifer, noticed. "You're one of our most talented designers," she said during a video call. "But you've missed 3 deadlines. The client work isn't up to your usual standard. What's going on?" I wanted to explain. The words stuck in my throat. What would I even say? My husband thinks I'm incompetent? I'm losing faith in my own mind? Instead, I said I'd do better. I didn't. Marcus suggested I quit entirely. Focus on your health. Let me take care of you. It sounded like love. It was a cage. I resigned from my job on a Tuesday afternoon, crying in Marcus's arms as he stroked my hair and murmured reassurances. I didn't notice the small smile on his face, or the way he immediately took my laptop. To help transition your work files. Without my job, my world shrank. Marcus worked from home 3 days a week, always nearby, always watching. He'd rearranged our apartment for better accessibility, which meant my computer was now in the living room where he could see the screen. My phone, which I'd sometimes forget on the counter during brain fog episodes, would be moved to safer locations I hadn't chosen. Friends started dropping away, not dramatically, just slowly, through canceled plans and unanswered messages Marcus claimed I'd never received. Layla called again, he'd mentioned casually. I told her you were resting. You don't need the stress of her constant worry. But Layla hadn't been calling to worry. She'd been calling to check if I was okay. Because even through her own busy life, she was in her second year of law school, she sensed something wrong. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning, 9 months into our marriage. I'd woken up clear-headed, body cooperating, mind sharp. One of those gift days where MS takes a back seat and I feel like myself. I decided to make breakfast, something I'd barely done in months. I was at the stove, making eggs, when Marcus appeared. What are you doing? His voice was tight. Making breakfast, I'm feeling good today. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, turned off the burner, and physically moved me away from the stove. You can't be trusted with this. You left it on last time. That was once, months ago. Once is enough. He said it with such finality, such absolute authority over my life, that something inside me cracked, not broke, cracked open, and through that crack, clarity poured in. This wasn't love. This was systematic erasure. Marcus wasn't protecting me from my disability. He was weaponizing it against me. I spent that day pretending to be tired, retreating to our bedroom while Marcus worked in his office. But I wasn't resting. I was thinking, planning, remembering. I remembered the questions he'd asked before we married, about my family's finances, about my parents' property in Bangladesh, the small inheritance I'd eventually receive, about my life insurance policy through work. I remembered how quickly he'd wanted to marry, how he'd suggested I add him to my accounts, but never added me to his. I remembered his cousin's wedding, where his aunt had mentioned poor Marcus, so burdened with Zari's condition, like I wasn't sitting right there. I remembered my laptop disappearing, then reappearing with different password requirements, files I couldn't access anymore. I was being erased, systematically, carefully, and I knew what came next. I'd seen it in the case studies my parents had shared from their community work. Guardianship petitions, conservatorships, legal declarations of incompetence, a disabled person stripped of autonomy, their assets managed by someone who claimed to have their best interests at heart. Marcus was going to have me declared incompetent. He was going to take legal control of my life, my assets, my inheritance, and my disability, my very real, very manageable disability, was going to be his weapon. That night, while Marcus slept, I made a decision that would destroy his plan. I pretended nothing had changed. For weeks, I played the role Marcus had written for me, confused, dependent, grateful for his care. But I was documenting everything. My phone had a hidden folder app. Every conversation went in there, time-stamped. Every time he questioned my memory, I recorded it. Every financial restriction, every isolated incident of him moving my belongings and claiming I'd misplaced them. Every appointment where he answered questions my doctors directed at me. I started seeing my neurologist alone, insisting on private appointments for personal medical discussions. Dr. Sarah Lynn had treated me for 4 years. She knew my baseline cognitive function, knew my medication regimen, knew that my MS was relapsing remitting and relatively well controlled. Zari? She said carefully during one appointment, "I need to ask you something. Has your home situation changed?" I broke down, told her everything. She listened without judgment, then did something that would save my life. She documented everything in my medical file. My cognitive function tests, consistently normal. My emotional state, consistent with someone experiencing psychological abuse. Her professional opinion, I had full capacity to make my own medical and legal decisions, and my disability did not impair my judgment in any way. "If anyone questions your competency," Dr. Lin said firmly, "they'll have to go through 5 years of medical records showing otherwise." Next, I reconnected with Layla, calling from a coffee shop during one of Marcus's in-office days. She answered on the first ring. "Zari? Oh my God, I've been so worried." "I need a lawyer," I said. "I need help, and I need you to not tell anyone, especially mom and dad, until I'm ready." Layla, brilliant and fierce and studying family law, didn't ask questions. "I'm coming to Seattle this weekend." She arrived with Marissa Chen, no relation to Marcus, a family law attorney who specialized in disability rights and financial abuse cases. We met at an accessible hotel conference room Marcus knew nothing about. "Tell me everything," Marissa said, recorder running with my permission. I did. 3 hours of timeline, evidence, documentation. Marissa's expression went from concerned to furious to grimly determined. "He's building a guardianship case," she confirmed. "The financial isolation, the medical appointment control, the questioning of your competency, these are textbook steps. He probably has a lawyer ready to file." "So what do I do?" Marissa smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "We file first." Over the next 8 weeks, I became someone Marcus didn't recognize. Not because I changed, but because I stopped pretending to be the person he wanted me to be. I started physical therapy again, pushing my body within safe limits, rebuilding strength. On good days, I walked more. On bad days, I used my chair without shame. Always, I was present in my own life again. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, depositing freelance design work Marcus didn't know I'd started taking on through an old colleague. Small projects, growing income, financial independence building slowly but surely. I reconnected with friends, explaining I'd been going through a difficult time but was getting help. They welcomed me back without judgment, just relief. And I watched Marcus panic. He could sense his control slipping. The more present I became in my own life, the more desperate his tactics grew. "You're not taking your medication correctly," he accused, though I'd never managed my own medication more carefully. "You're exhausting yourself with this freelance nonsense. You're going to trigger a relapse. Your sister is putting ideas in your head. She doesn't understand your condition like I do." But his trump card was coming. I knew it. Marissa knew it. On a Wednesday morning, Marcus served me with papers, a guardianship petition filed in King County Superior Court, requesting he be appointed my legal guardian due to my inability to care for myself or manage my affairs due to progressive neurological disease. The petition was thorough, detailed, convincing if you didn't know the truth. It cited my resignation from work, my frequent confusion and memory loss, my inability to manage daily tasks safely, statements from his family about my deteriorating condition, even a letter from a doctor I'd never met, claiming I demonstrated concerning cognitive decline during a consultation I'd never attended. I read it in the living room, Marcus watching me with false sympathy. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said softly, "but I love you too much to watch you hurt yourself. This is for your own good." I looked up at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and said the only thing that mattered. "I want a divorce." His expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation, then that patient smile. "Zari, you're not thinking clearly. This is exactly why we need the guardianship." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I want a divorce. I've already filed. That was true. Marissa had filed that morning, minutes before Marcus served his papers. Divorce proceedings with a detailed counterpetition challenging his guardianship request, supported by 5 years of medical records, detailed financial documentation, and evidence of systematic psychological abuse. Marcus's smile disappeared completely. You can't do this. You're not competent to make these decisions. That's for a judge to decide. I'll see you in court. The court hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. 6 weeks where Marcus became someone I didn't recognize at all. He moved out, claiming he couldn't bear to watch me self-destruct. He stopped depositing money into our joint account, forcing me to rely on my freelance income, not realizing I'd been preparing for exactly this. He hired an expensive attorney who filed motion after motion, trying to get an emergency guardianship order before the divorce could proceed. But every motion was met with evidence from my legal team, medical records from Dr. Lin, cognitive function tests I'd aced, statements from colleagues about my work quality, financial records showing Marcus's systematic isolation tactics, recordings of him questioning my competency, moving my belongings, restricting my access to money. And the fake doctor's letter? That fell apart when Marissa's investigator discovered the physician was actually Marcus's college roommate who dropped out of medical school and was now working in medical device sales. Fraud, forgery, potential criminal charges. The day of the hearing, I arrived at King County Courthouse early. Marissa pushed my wheelchair. I was having a bad day physically, but my mind was crystal clear. While Layla walked beside us, looking every inch the fierce lawyer she was becoming. Marcus was already there with his attorney, looking confident. He still thought he'd win, still thought my wheelchair was evidence of incompetence. Judge Patricia Morrison was in her 60s, stern-faced, with a reputation for not tolerating bullshit in her courtroom. Marcus's attorney spoke first, painting a picture of a tragically declining woman who needed protection from her own poor judgment. He emphasized my resignation from work, my use of a wheelchair, my neurological condition. Then, Marissa stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that tells a very different story. For 2 hours, she methodically destroyed Marcus's case. Medical records showing stable, well-managed MS with no cognitive decline. Work samples from my recent freelance projects, high-quality complex design work that required sophisticated thinking, financial records showing Marcus had systematically isolated me from money, recordings of his manufactured concerns and fake confusion about my competency. And then, she called Dr. Lin to testify via video conference. In your professional opinion, Marissa asked, does Ms. Zari have the cognitive capacity to make her own legal, medical, and financial decisions? Dr. Lin didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Ms. Zari has multiple sclerosis, which affects her mobility and causes intermittent fatigue and sensory symptoms. It does not affect her judgment, her intelligence, or her capacity to manage her own affairs. Her cognitive function tests have been consistently normal throughout her treatment. What I observed in recent months was not cognitive decline from MS. It was the psychological impact of being in an abusive situation where her competency was constantly questioned. I watched Marcus's face during this testimony, watched the confidence drain away, watched him realize he'd lost. Judge Morrison looked at him with barely concealed disgust. Mr. Chen, did you honestly believe filing a fraudulent guardianship petition was going to work? His attorney tried to speak. The judge silenced him with a look. I've seen a lot of things in this courtroom, Judge Morrison continued, but weaponizing someone's disability against them is particularly despicable. This petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the King County Prosecutor's Office for potential fraud charges relating to the forged medical documentation. Ms. Zari's divorce petition will proceed in family court, and I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Mr. Chen from accessing any of her financial accounts or medical information. She looked at me then, her stern expression softening slightly. Ms. Zari, I apologize that you had to go through this process to prove what should have been obvious, that you are more than capable of managing your own life. Good luck to you. That's when I smiled. Not triumphantly, not smugly, just peacefully. Because Marcus had tried to erase me, and instead, I'd erased his plan entirely. The divorce took 4 more months to finalize. Marcus fought every step, but his legal position was destroyed. The evidence of financial abuse, the attempted guardianship fraud, the systematic isolation, it all built a case that left him with nothing. I got our apartment, my full financial accounts, an equitable split of marital assets that heavily favored me due to his misconduct, and most importantly, my freedom. The prosecutor did file charges. Marcus took a plea deal: fraud, forgery, attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, probation, a hefty fine, permanent record. Not prison, but justice enough. My parents flew in from Bangladesh when they learned everything. My mother cried, angry at herself for not seeing what was happening. My father wanted to confront Marcus personally. Layla had to physically stop him. The best revenge, Layla said firmly, is Zari living her best life. She was right. I rebuilt slowly, took on more freelance work, eventually joining a remote design agency that valued my skills over my mobility status. Made enough to move to a fully accessible apartment with wide doorways, roll-in shower, and adapted kitchen, all chosen by me for me. I reconnected with friends I'd lost during the Marcus years. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged. Too much time had passed. But others welcomed me back with understanding and love. I started volunteering with a disability rights organization, sharing my story with others facing similar situations. Guardianship abuse is more common than people realize, and many people don't have the resources or support system I'd been fortunate enough to access. And I started dating again, eventually, carefully, with firm boundaries and hard-won wisdom about red flags. Not rushing, not settling, just living. 2 years after that courtroom hearing, I was at a coffee shop. The same one where I'd met Marcus, actually, working on a design project when someone approached my table. Excuse me, are you Zari Ahmed, the designer who created the accessibility interface for the transit app? I looked up at a young woman with a prosthetic leg, smiling hopefully. That's me. I'm a UX designer too, and I just wanted to say your work is incredible. That interface design made using public transit actually possible for me. Thank you. We talked for an hour about design, accessibility, the importance of disabled people creating technology for disabled people. She asked if I ever took on mentorship opportunities. I said yes. Later that evening, sitting on my apartment balcony watching the Seattle sunset, I thought about Marcus. Not with anger anymore, just with distant recognition of what I'd escaped. He'd tried to control me because I'm disabled. He'd thought my wheelchair was a weakness he could exploit. He'd thought my disease made me incompetent. But that one decision, to document everything, to seek help, to fight back strategically instead of just enduring, destroyed his entire plan. My disability wasn't my weakness. His cruelty was his. And I didn't just survive. I built a life on my own terms, a life more authentic and fulfilling than anything I'd had before him. Layla called as I was heading inside. Hey, you free for dinner tomorrow? Mom and Dad's anniversary is coming up and they want to do something special. I'll be there. Also, she added, voice carefully casual, there's this guy in my study group. He's really nice, respectful, works with immigrant rights organizations. I thought maybe, Layla. I know. Just thought I'd mention it. No pressure. I smiled. Tell me about him. Because I wasn't defined by what happened to me. I wasn't limited by my disability or damaged by my past. I was Zari, designer, sister, daughter, survivor, fighter, and I was free. The Seattle sky darkened to deep purple, lights flickering on across the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was living with the consequences of his choices. I was living with the rewards of mine. People ask me sometimes if I regret marrying him, if I wish I'd seen the signs earlier, avoided the whole terrible experience. Honestly, I can't regret something that taught me my own strength. I can't wish away the fire that forged me into someone who refuses to be diminished. Marcus thought my disability was a target. He was wrong. It was just one part of a whole complex, capable person who refused to be erased. Dr. Lin told me once that resilience isn't about not breaking. It's about how you put yourself back together after. I broke during those months with Marcus, but the person I rebuilt was stronger, wiser, and absolutely unwilling to be controlled. 3 months later, I spoke at a disability rights conference about guardianship abuse and financial exploitation. 200 people in the audience, many with their own stories of being underestimated, controlled, dismissed because of their disabilities. I stood at the podium. Yes, stood, because it was a good day and I wanted to, and told them my story. Not for sympathy, for solidarity. They will try to tell you that your disability makes you less, I said. Less capable, less worthy, less human. They will try to use your diagnosis as a weapon against you. And sometimes, they'll do it while claiming to love you. Heads nodded throughout the room. Recognition. Shared pain. But here's what I learned. My MS doesn't make me incompetent. It makes me resourceful. It makes me strategic. It makes me someone who knows how to fight for what matters, because I've been fighting my own body for years, and I'm still here. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, people approached me with their own stories. A man whose brother tried to institutionalize him to access his inheritance. A woman whose husband used her epilepsy to question her parenting. An elderly couple whose adult children were fighting over conservatorship of their mother, who had Parkinson's but a perfectly sharp mind. What do I do? They all asked in various ways. Document everything, I said. Find your people, trust your own judgment, and fight like hell, because you're worth fighting for. I gave them Marissa's contact information, connected them with disability rights lawyers, shared resources I discovered, paid forward the help I'd received. Because that's what justice looks like sometimes. Not just winning your own case, but using that victory to help others win theirs. I still use a wheelchair most days. My MS hasn't gone away. It never will. Some mornings I wake up with my legs numb, my vision blurry, my body betraying me in new and creative ways. But I'm not controlled by it. Not by the disease, and definitely not by anyone who thinks they can use it against me. My parents visit more often now. Mom worries less, though she still makes too much food whenever she's here. Dad walks with me through the city, pushing my chair when I need it, walking beside me when I don't. We talk about everything. My work, their community projects, politics, family back in Bangladesh. We're proud of you, Dad said during one of these walks. Not just for surviving, but for how you survived. With dignity. With strength. Layla finished law school and passed the bar. She's now working for the same disability rights organization where I volunteer, specifically handling guardianship abuse cases. You inspired me, she admitted over dinner one night. Watching you fight back, watching you refuse to be diminished. That's the kind of lawyer I want to be. And me? I'm thriving in ways I never could have during those dark months with Marcus. My design work is being recognized. The Transit app interface led to other accessibility projects, a hospital wayfinding system, an adapted learning platform for disabled students, a home automation system designed by disabled engineers for disabled users. I'm making a difference, not despite my disability, but informed by it. I even started dating that guy from Layla's study group. Rahim is kind, respectful, and the first time he saw me transfer from my wheelchair to his car, he just asked, "How can I help?" Not with pity, just practicality. When I told him my story, the full story, Marcus and the guardianship petition and everything, he listened without interruption. Then he said something that made me love him. He tried to make you small because he was small. But you can't diminish light. You can only reveal your own darkness by trying. We're taking things slow, learning each other, building something based on mutual respect, not control. And sometimes, late at night when my body aches and the MS fog creeps in, I think about that version of myself who sat in Marcus's apartment, questioning her own mind, believing the lies he told about her competency. I want to go back and tell her, you're not losing yourself. You're being stolen from, and you're going to take yourself back. But I can't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward, fight forward, live forward. Last week, I got an email from Marcus, the first communication since the divorce finalized. My hand hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won. The message was brief. I'm sorry for what I put you through. I was wrong. You deserved better. Maybe he meant it. Maybe it was another manipulation. I'll never know, and honestly, I don't care. I deleted it without responding. Because Marcus doesn't get access to my time, my energy, or my forgiveness anymore. He used up his chances when he tried to erase me. Some people don't deserve closure. They just deserve absence. I closed my laptop, looking around my apartment, my space, my choices, my life. The wheelchair sitting near the door wasn't a symbol of weakness or incompetence. It was a tool that let me navigate the world on my terms. My MS wasn't a tragedy. It was just part of my story. Not the whole story, not even the most important part. The most important part was this. I fought for myself. I believed in myself when someone I loved tried to convince me I couldn't trust my own mind. I stood up, literally and figuratively, and said no. And I won. Not just in court, not just financially. I won my life back. That's what Marcus never understood. He thought taking control of my assets, my medical decisions, my daily existence would give him power. But power isn't about control. It's about autonomy, agency, the ability to shape your own story. And my story isn't, disabled woman needs to be protected. It's, strong woman with a disability protects herself from someone who tried to weaponize her vulnerability. Big difference. I think about the young designer who approached me at the coffee shop, thanking me for creating accessible technology. I think about the people at the disability rights conference, finding hope in my story. I think about the guardianship abuse cases Layla is winning, using the template from my victory. One decision destroyed Marcus's plan, but it did more than that. It created a blueprint for others to follow. It showed that disabled people aren't just survivors. We're fighters, strategists, winners, and we refuse to be erased. The judge who heard my case sent me a card after everything finalized. Inside, she'd written, "You didn't just advocate for yourself, you advocated for everyone who comes after you. That's legacy." She's right. My legacy isn't MS. It isn't the bad marriage or the courtroom drama or any of the pain Marcus inflicted. My legacy is this. I turned a weapon used against me into a shield for others. I transformed my pain into purpose. I refuse to let anyone's cruel assumptions about my disability define my worth. And every day I wake up in my accessible apartment, work on designs that make the world more inclusive, and live life on my own terms. I'm proving something. Important. Disability isn't inability. Wheelchairs aren't prisons. And underestimating someone because they need accommodation isn't just wrong. It's strategically stupid. Marcus learned that the hard way. The world is slowly learning it too. And me? I'm just getting started. Because the woman who survived Marcus Chen is someone who knows her own strength, who trusts her own judgment, who understands that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about standing back up in whatever form that takes and refusing to stay down. I'm Zari Ahmed, designer, advocate, survivor, fighter, and the decision that destroyed his plan? It was the simplest one in the world. I chose myself. Your disability is not your weakness. Their cruelty is theirs.